I can tell you the child is 10-month-old. His name was Davion. And so Davion, I believe, would have been about 15 or 16 years old today if he had lived. Myself and Detective Mayfield had gotten called out to Children's Hospital about 2 or 3 a.m., as we do a lot in this unit, regarding Davion having been taken there by ambulance because he had a massive head injury, some rib fractures, and a punctured lung. One thing we want to do every time, we want to get it right. We don't want to put anybody in jail that doesn't need to go to jail. But the people that need to go for abusing children, we want to get that right every time. So we have a standard that we have to live up to. People have rights, and we're gonna do the right thing every time. I've learned that if we can help one a day, that's awesome. If you get the chance to help 2 or 3 or more, hey man, that's more the merrier. But if you can help one, well then we've done our job, and we're going to continue to do our job. And that's one thing that helps me get through. If we can help one every day, well then we're doing the right thing.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree. And we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Child abuse casts a shadow the length of a lifetime. Herbert Ward. In preparation for this episode and this topic, this quote resonated with me. Being a survivor of child abuse myself, I have a constant reminder that we may not see the mark of abuse on a child because it is not all physical. The shadow of this early abuse can spread the length of a lifetime. Today's guest has dedicated over 30 years to the citizens of Dallas, and nearly 2 decades of that have been protecting the lives of the true innocent and those who cannot protect themselves, the children. Detective Corey Foreman grew up in Garland, Texas, and joined the Dallas Police Department in 1993 in Class 238. He is now married and still drives that Toyota with over 300,000 miles, and his goal is to make it to 500K. Once again, proving that Toyota makes a damn fine vehicle. This episode will detail Detective Foreman's life and his career, but also give the listener a small peek on this awful epidemic of child abuse. We will take you step by step through an investigation, the multiple partners involved, and how it literally takes a village to conduct a child abuse case, to get some semblance of justice for these kids. It's the ATO's honor to welcome on the 2023 Irish Birch Partner of the Year recipient, Child Abuse Detective Corey Foreman, badge 6997. Detective Foreman, welcome to the ATO stage.
Thank you.
Before we get into your story, we're going to talk about some co-hosts we have here. We always have the great Sergeant Kent Wolverton, but we have Keisha. Can you go ahead and tell the listener who you are?
I'm Nikisha Biglow, Director of Partner Relations at the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center.
Okay. And my wife, Detective Kristen King. Can you go ahead and say hello?
Hi, it's good to be here again.
So, this episode, it's kind of long overdue. I've been trying to get Corey on for a good while, and also get somebody on this topic of child abuse. And I can't think of a better person to have on to discuss this type of investigation. And there's going to be parts of it I'm sure going to be heavy. I'm not we have a flow set, but I'm not exactly sure what cases he's going to talk about. But there's no pretty in child abuse investigations. Corey, you ready to get into it?
Let's get it cracking.
All right. I'm going to start off with some soft pitches here. Where did you grow up?
Garland, Texas.
Okay. I've talked about Garland before. It's like, I don't know, like 15 minutes east of Dallas.
Correct.
Northeast-ish?
Northeast.
Okay. Growing up there in Garland, what was home life like for you, the family?
I grew up with my mom. I had a sister and a stepdad. At some point, due to some family violence issues, my sister went to live with her grandmother, and I went to live with my aunt, my mom's sister. And pretty much my aunt raised me from the age of 8 until 18.
Okay. How did that impact you? Did you have to move schools and or any of that?
I did, because initially with my mom, we were living in Oak Cliff, and my aunt lived in Garland. And so I moved to Garland, and I already had some friends there because I spent a lot of time there anyway. And so I went to school and grew up there. So
until 8 year old, you were at Oak Cliff?
Yes.
Okay, what part of town of that? What school?
It was Mark Twain Elementary School.
I went to Bertie Alexander.
Okay.
You remember that one that's over there?
Yes.
Yeah. So Garland, it's changed a lot. When you were there, Garland it was pretty nice. It's a nicer suburb of Dallas.
Well, yes, it is, but I didn't live on the nicer side.
Okay.
I lived more on the east side of Garland. The demographics have changed significantly since I was there. I can tell you that in my neighborhood, there was not a single Caucasian family. There was one Hispanic family that lived across the alley from us. However, now my aunt still lives in the same house, and probably 80% of that neighborhood is now Hispanic.
Okay, wow. Was it a big difference from going from Oak Cliff to Garland?
Not a huge difference at all.
Okay.
No.
Did you play sports?
I did. I ran track. I played football. Eventually, when I graduated from Garland High School in '88, I got a track scholarship at Eastern Oklahoma State.
Wow.
Junior
What'd you
college. I ran the half mile and the quarter mile.
Okay. What was your quarter time?
I believe it was a 48.5 or something like that.
That's strong.
Yeah. Enough to get me a scholarship at junior college.
Nice. So when you got out of, we're going to segue into college. You get into college, and where'd you go to college?
Eastern Oklahoma State Junior College.
In your major?
Back then, it was
you were care about running track.
yeah, it was just taking the basics. I did 2 years there, and then I went to UT Dallas in Richardson.
Okay.
Yeah,
and what did you focus on then? I want to get into an internship that you did.
Right. Well, my major was interdisciplinary studies.
Okay.
With a focus on law enforcement. And part of my degree plan is that I had to do an internship. And so in one of my law classes, I met a detective. She was a detective back then in the child abuse unit. Her name is Sabre Garibay. And she did 20 years in the child abuse unit. And I believe she did 26 or 28 years on the police department. She befriended me, and we talked. And she basically was like, hey, I know part of the degree plan is you got to do an internship. And she explained to me that she was with child abuse, and that she was at the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. That's where her base of operation was.
Where was the DCAC at that time?
At that time, it was at 3611 Swiss Avenue. And that was back in 1993.
Okay. So you started interning there. How'd that look for you as far as doing internship?
Well, initially, I met with the families when they brought the kids in. Sometimes even played with the kids and got them food. But me knowing Detective Garibay, she talked to Sergeant Rich, Fred Rich, who was the sergeant at the time, and said, hey, he's interested in law enforcement. Can he kind of hang out with us a little bit and see exactly what we do? And I was allowed to do that.
Just do a little bit more than a normal run-of-the-mill internship, the shredding papers and filing.
Right. I was able to observe detectives do interrogations. I was able to see some of the forensic interviews, not a whole lot, but definitely observe the interrogations.
Before, you said you were focusing in law enforcement, so
Yes.
you wanted to be a police officer before that?
I had thought about it. I actually took a class on policing, and I thought it was pretty good. Now, let me preface by saying this. I'm one of those people who never had any negative interactions with the police growing up. As a matter of fact, the only interaction I had with the police was, I believe it was back in 78. My mom and I were driving down 30, and we had a flat tire, and it was raining and it was cold, and an officer stopped and fixed the tire and everything. And then after that, now granted, this was back in the 70s, and I believe my mom was about 28 years old, and she was pretty good looking. And so after that, the officer invited us to go to McDonald's. And so we went to McDonald's, and he bought us some McDonald's, and that was the one and only experience I had with the police, Dallas police, and it was really good.
Did you, before you met Sabra, had you considered child abuse, or had you thought about that?
No, actually no, because at that time I didn't even know child abuse existed. I grew up pretty green. I didn't know anyone who had been physically or sexually abused. I'd never even heard of anything like that.
What was it like when you went to the Advocacy Center and then started seeing the interrogations and started seeing the families, and was that kind of a rude awakening for you?
It definitely was. I was quite green at the time, and like I said, I didn't know child abuse existed. I'd never heard of it before, and it definitely, my interest grew because of that.
One thing I've noticed about child abuse is even going into it, even if you do know that child abuse existed and you kind of have an idea, and now we have Law and Order, SVU, and
Right.
everybody's seen that.
Right.
You don't know until you get into it
Exactly.
how bad it gets. And you think you know, but once you get into it, you don't like how bad it really gets sometimes.
So true. So true.
How did that sorrow strike you, though? I mean, being so young yourself, and then coming in and you're seeing kids. You say that you're green to it. Being green to a type of investigation or type of offense is one thing, but being impacted by the clear sorrow from
Correct.
these kids are coming in. How do
Correct.
you remember how that struck you back then?
I was dumbfounded. I was really saddened to see that something like that was happening, because like I said, I've never known anyone that it happened to. Not saying that it didn't happen, I just wasn't aware of it, and I've never been a victim myself. Okay. And so it was definitely something to see, and I gained interest because of that.
Do you think you gained more interest in getting into law enforcement by doing that?
Most definitely.
Okay. Being in that internship back then, did you have in the back of your mind, like, okay, this may ultimately be something I want to do once I get in a department? And did you ever think about that?
It did. Even Detective Garibay was like, hey, if you ever decide to join the department, if you promote and we have an opening, and I'm still here, I'll let you know about it. And, Sergeant Rich, and, you need to apply for a position if one comes open. And it was maybe 11, 12 years after I'd been on the department that I promoted and a position had come open. Now, back then, being a child abuse detective was a coveted position, and you had a whole lot of people apply, and a lot of people wanted that job. And so I was lucky enough to have applied, and like I said, I knew Detective Garibay, and I hadn't seen or talked to Sergeant Rich in all those years since the internship.
Why did you pick Dallas?
Well, it's interesting. So before I graduated from college, I was basically told to apply everywhere because you never know. So one of the first places I applied was the home of our chief, Garcia, was San Jose Police Department. I went out. I did the application process. I actually got hired by San Jose. However, the academy was to start about a month before I graduated from college. So I had to turn the job down, and they were going to recycle me into a later class. Well, while I'm waiting over the summer, I got the call from Dallas on a Wednesday saying, if you want this job, be here Thursday. And so one in the hand's better than two in the bush.
Yeah, Dallas always calls first. And I think there's a common theme with our recordings. People say they throw out the feelers to a lot of departments.
Right.
And Dallas's door opens first.
Right.
So what academy class did you get into?
I was in class 238.
Are there any other classmates still in the department from that class?
I believe it's Jason Perez. Dexter Ingram just retired. There's Marco Salias. Jim, I can't think of his last name. He's a sergeant at South Central. He's been there for a while.
He's still on?
He's still on the department.
Sorry, Jim. We'll get your name right.
I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, he don't listen anyway. So.
And Janie, her previous name was Flowers. She's in
PIU.
Yeah, Jamie Bisabel.
Yeah, Janie Bell.
Janie Bell.
Yeah, she's in PIU now.
Yeah, Jamie Bell was in my class, and I think there's only 4 of us left right now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have that Toyota back then?
Oh, that Toyota. No, actually, I did not. We were discussing to have a Toyota 4Runner with 300,000 miles on it. No, I bought that Toyota 5 years ago with 50,000 miles on it. So I've been driving a lot over the past 5 years.
You live in Oklahoma?
Well, no, I got a 13-year-old daughter
who
lives in Fort Worth. And, even though the visitation's every other weekend, she wants to come every weekend because, it's daddy gets her what she wants, and she runs track. So we do a lot of traveling down to South Texas or whatnot, other areas throughout the state to watch her run.
I did mention that Toyota in the intro that you're pushing for 500,000
Yes, sir. I refuse to buy another automobile until I absolutely have
What
to.
Year is that?
It is a 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Toyota's a fine vehicle.
They are. Yeah. When this one dies, I'll get another one.
Okay. So when you graduated the academy, what division did you go out to?
I went to Northeast Patrol Division. Of course, things were a lot different back then. I had 3 trainers who were all very different, all very good, but all very different. So I learned a whole lot. I would have to say deceased Walter Clifton, who was my first phase trainer on days. He was an awesome guy. He was a full bird colonel in the military at the time, and so I learned a whole lot from him. The most important thing I learned from him about being a police officer is the meaning of the word discretion. Basically telling me that just because you can put somebody in jail doesn't always mean you should. Use your discretion as an officer, and that's one thing I carry along with me right now as being a detective.
Did you do before you became a detective? Did you do field training?
I did.
Okay, where at?
Northeast. Northwest Patrol on deep nights. Yes.
Okay. Did you keep that same mantra of discretion to the rookies? Did you pass that along?
Most definitely. Okay. Discretion and make a decision. Try to make the right decisions with the information that you have. And if it happens to be the wrong decision, if your heart was right, we can fix that. Don't worry about it, but make a decision.
Yeah, you got to make a decision,
right?
Because the not making a decision could have more of an impact than actually making a subpar decision.
Most definitely.
So we touched on the child abuse. So you danced around how you applied. Let's get into that. Let's talk about when that position finally came open. That is the first detective job that you.
It's the first detective job that I had. And actually, when Detective Garibay called me and said, "Hey, we have an opening. Did you promote?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, you need to apply." Now, let me tell you this. I was torn, Joe, because I was very happy on Deep Nights in Patrol, as strange as it sounds. I was very happy in Patrol at the time. And I interviewed for the job. And the day after the interview, I had a trip planned to Miami. And so I was in Miami for a week and a half. And when I got back, my sergeant's like, "Hey, they've been looking for you in child abuse. Do you want the job? Because it's yours." And I was excited. And so I was like, well, I'm still happy in patrol, but I want to try that. And my best friend, who's not in law enforcement, we talked about, he's like, "Look, man, you need to do that. If it's not the right fit for you, if you're not happy, can't you always go back to Deep Nights at Northwest?" It's like, yeah, you're right. And so I took the step.
Nobody's beating down that door. Deep Nights.
That's what I hear.
What were you doing that Detective Garibay remembered you after 10 years? That's a long time for someone to be thinking about you and being like, "Hey, we finally got a spot." Why do you think she called you after all that time?
I had seen her back and forth over the years. And I think at the time I was so excited about what I was learning in child abuse at the time. And I think that's what it was. I was excited. I wanted to learn. And the mere fact that I think I was just so green and just had no idea that those type of crimes existed.
So working Deep Nights, you didn't see a whole lot of detectives. Let's be honest.
No, as a matter of fact, the only time I ever saw detectives were homicide detectives. And, I was just thinking the other day when we're talking about doing this podcast, in my 12 years of work in patrol, before I became a detective, I didn't have not one child abuse call in patrol, which is kind of different because now sometimes I see the same officers come through the door.
Why do you think that? I mean, I've noticed that too. There's a lot of officers. Do you think they are? Well, everybody. There's an interest in that type of offense, and also being a part of an offense to call you to work the case up to get that kid some justice. But you didn't have that background, because I know that Kristen talks about there are a lot of officers out in the streets that it seems like they volunteer for those type of calls.
Right.
Right. And there's officers that volunteer for every drug house call. There's right. DWIs that jump on. So it's just something that they gravitate to,
right,
for whatever reason.
Right.
So you not having any detective experience, how uncommon was that, going to a unit like that? Because you said that was a coveted position.
Right. It was a coveted position back at that time, and I think it still is now, but it has to be the right person. From what I understand, I did very well in the interview, and that had a lot to do with it. And of course, I did have the interest as well.
When you also you had people pulling for you too, because
I did,
and that does make a difference. But also, you did have some background in the inner workings of the DCAC, which
correct,
that entity is crucial to these investigations.
It is crucial in almost every aspect of our investigations.
Yeah, I will say that having the background, I would think, in the child abuse, so they know you, they know that they get along with you, they know that you can handle the material, and you kind of already have an idea of how the entire team works, because it really is a team system, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Right.
Is not having to go over that with you probably helped. And then you said that the sergeant was the same one that was still there.
Yeah, he was. But let me say on this note, the week he hired me, the week I started, the following week he retired. So I made a promise to him that I would do a good job, and that he made the right choice. And so,
are there a lot of men in that division over there with child abuse? It seems like it would be dominated more by the female detectives.
Actually not. I believe there's 5 of us, correct, Christian?
Yeah, it's almost 50-50 right now between men and women, actually.
How did that look whenever you got there, though, as far as the makeup and
Actually, there was more. There were more men.
Really?
Back
Okay.
when I interned back in the 90s.
Okay.
And I believe there was only 2 women at the time. Only 2 female detectives.
There were probably more men on the department too at the time too.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Certainly.
What about who were the bosses? Whenever you said
I was Sergeant Fred Rich was
he
the
took
boss.
off, but who took over after that?
It was Sergeant Brenda Nichols.
Oh yeah.
And then Sergeant Reggie Matthews retired about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I was in legal whenever he retired.
Right.
I remember. Yeah. I remember him.
And now it's Sergeant Mike Vaughn.
Yep.
What was we talked about between us about training and how it's changed over the years and how different people have kind of gotten different training. What was training like for you when you joined?
Well, my trainer was Kimberly Mayfield. Kimberly's a special individual, fantastic detective. I learned a lot from her. Kimberly and Sabre Garibay were definitely my mentors. They taught me a lot. Sabre Garibay was the most thorough person I've ever met in my life, which was great. And the thing about Kim is any questions I had, if she didn't have the answer, she knew where to find it. One thing that Kim taught me was that if I'm working a case, if I'm having some trouble trying to really figure out what I want to do with it, she's like, hey, if it's not a decision that has to be made immediately, put it to the side. Come back 2-3 weeks, a month, and just see how you feel. And I still do that yet today. And by doing that, and even speaking to other detectives, senior detectives like myself, and even some younger detectives to get a different perspective, that helps a whole lot.
Yeah, to have that collaboration.
Definitely.
Everybody thinks differently.
Correct.
And looks at different lenses.
Just want to shout out Kim Mayfield. She worked my first ever child abuse case, and I think every child abuse case that I was ever a part of after that.
Right.
She was there for a long time before she decided to go do other things. So
Yes.
She was also our ATO treasurer.
Okay.
For a long time.
Right.
And I mean, she just retired, right?
Yeah, she just retired
23.
maybe
Last year?
2 months ago.
Yeah, it was
Something
that.
like
A long time, and now you're the senior detective in that unit, right?
I am.
Okay. And what year was that you got in there?
I believe it was 2006, I believe it was.
Okay. And you're still active there.
I'm still there.
Okay.
Still grinding out every day.
Can you talk about the first ever case? I know. So Kim was, say, a mentor.
Yeah, she was. Kim actually trained me when I came in. And so usually back then, before you received a major case as a new detective, it was about a year before you received a major case back then. That major case came in. I can tell you the child was 10-month-old. His name was Davion. And so Davion, I believe, would have been about 15 or 16 years old today if he had lived. Myself and Detective Mayfield had gotten called out to Children's Hospital about 2 or 3 a.m., as we do a lot in this unit, regarding Davion having been taken there by ambulance because he had a massive head injury, some rib fractures, and a punctured lung. When we got there, I spoke with Davion's mother, who told me that her boyfriend, who was not the child's father, had been babysitting him while she was at work, and that he called her basically stating that something was wrong with Davion and she needed to come home. So after speaking with her, I sat down and I spoke with him, and he basically explained to me the same thing. And in our interviews, when we're called out like that, we always do what's called a soft interview. We're not applying any pressure, not anything, because we're still gathering facts. After speaking with the physician on duty, my understanding with this child was low sick. He was very ill, and the possibility of him making it through the night was slim to none. With that information, I asked the boyfriend if he'd be willing to come to headquarters and speak with me about further, and he did. So at that time, we came down to headquarters, and where our interview rooms were here in headquarters at the time, on the child abuse side, it was audio, but there wasn't any video. And so I had spoken with him, and he had given a story that Davion was pushing around a little push toy in the bedroom, and he tripped and fell and hit his head on the bedpost. And he began to seize, and that's when he called Davion's mom, and then eventually 911 was called and took the child to the hospital. And so the REACH team, who is our physicians that at Children's, who are specialists, they did an evaluation of the child and basically talked about all of his injuries and everything. And one thing we do in our investigations is we speak with the REACH doctors, and we'll say, well, this is a story I was given. How likely is it that the injuries could have possibly been caused by this? And they will tell us yes or no. And in that particular case, I was told no. That type of blunt force trauma couldn't be caused by a child pushing a push toy and falling into the bedpost. And so based upon the story that was given, I had enough to obtain a warrant for his arrest and place him in jail. Several months later, the case goes to trial, and this is my first time ever testifying in a child abuse case. And I remember as I'm on the stand testifying, the prosecutor asked me, she's like, Detective Foreman, can you talk to me about what the defendant said during your interview? And I started talking, and the judge stood up, and she did, Detective, don't you say one more word. If you do, I'll hold you in contempt. And I looked at her, and of course I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be held in contempt. And she demanded that the prosecutor and the defense come up to the desk and to her bench and speak with her. And then after that, there was a break, and basically the judge told me that if this trial is lost, it's going to be because of me and my actions. And still, being young as a detective, I didn't know exactly what I had done wrong. And later on, I learned that I didn't do anything wrong at all. That there was just, sometimes there's things going on in the background that you don't know about. And that was one of those situations. And needless to say, at the end of the day, there was a conviction, and he got 50 years for his actions against Davion, who would have been 15 or 16 now. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see those days, to see now, and that's a tragedy. And unfortunately, that happens so often with the cases that we work.
And that's the first major case.
That was the first major case that I was a lead detective on, and I learned a lot from that. I learned a whole lot from that.
Even from the testimony aspect.
Even from the testimony aspect, one of the issues that the judge had was that when I interviewed him, the defendant, at the hospital, that the room was really small, that I didn't tell him that he could refuse to come to headquarters and speak with me. Oh, and I wasn't aware of that. I didn't tell him that he had to go. I said, would you be willing to? And he said yes. And that's something that the defense brought up, and it was an issue, and I think it was a tactic that was used at that time. But nevertheless, justice prevailed in that particular case.
Just for the listeners, because I'm not entirely sure myself, can you describe what a REACH doctor is and what their function is?
REACH doctors at the REACH clinic at Children's, they're doctors that are specifically trained in the areas of child abuse and making a determination if an injury or whatnot is caused by something that's abusive. Kristen, can you further elaborate on that? You can probably
they're specialized, and there's actually not that many certified child abuse doctors in the United States. I found out recently, so it is a more rare specialty. But they do skeletal surveys, like 20-something X-rays. They can look at a break or an injury, and they can usually tell you the mechanism or what caused it. And I will tell you that I have been really skeptical before, because I'll be getting a story from a parent and it sounds legit, and I'm like, are we sure that's not what happened? And the doctors will say, no, there's no way that's what caused this break. It had to have been like a twisting force. It had to have been a loading force. It had to have been whatever. And sure enough, I keep talking to the parent and exactly what the doctor said. So they are very good at what they do. They can look at burns, they can look at broken bones, they can look at head injuries, and they can really give us an idea. And even if they can't immediately say what happened, we can take back a story or tell them what the parents are telling us happened and say, is this possible? And they can say, yes, that's possible. No, that's not what happened. There's no way.
Do you guys see consistencies in the stories that you get from the parents?
On like the lies that we get?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And Corey can probably talk more about that.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So you talked about your first case ever, and you did get some semblance of justice. Can you walk us through how an investigation looks in your unit as far as getting assigned the case and your steps and all these different pieces that you put together over the years of how it goes for that type of investigation?
Well, let's just say if it's a sex abuse case.
Okay.
If it's a sex abuse case, once the case is assigned to us, we set up what's called a forensic interview, where the child is interviewed at the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center by a forensic interviewer. Forensic interviewers are not police, they're not CPS, they're not with the courts, they're independent. The interviewers are trained to interview children. It's what's accepted in the court, it's what's preferred from the district attorney's office or whatnot for investigations. I can tell you now, Nikisha was a forensic interviewer, and they're very special people. I couldn't do what they do because I can tell you this for sure. When a child is making an outcry during an interview about being sexually assaulted, I can investigate child abuse cases, but that I cannot do. I cannot talk to a child that's talking about being sexually assaulted because I would be crying with them. I would be in a fetal position, sucking my thumb on the floor in that room. And so that's not good. I don't think it'd be good for the child. I mean, they would much rather talk to somebody that reminds them of their mom or their older sister than a 6'3" guy, 230 pounds with a voice like Darth Vader.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So forensic interviewers, Keisha, why don't you talk about the forensic interview process, since that was your area of expertise and you're one of the best to ever do it.
I paid him to say that.
Can you also kind of real quick go over, while you're doing that, the MDT model and kind of just explain the players to everybody too?
Sure. So prior to Corey's involvement in the child abuse unit, when child abuse cases were investigated, everyone was basically doing their own thing. No one was communicating. No one was collaborating at all. And so children were falling through the cracks. And so the purpose of the Advocacy Center was to basically bring all of these entities together and to make sure that we're all collaborating and communicating and together, ensuring that no child falls through the cracks. And so the purpose of the forensic interview, it's a fact-finding interview. It's conducted at the developmental level of the child, but the sole purpose of it is to gather that information for the investigative parties, but in a way that is child-friendly, in a way that as the detective and the investigators are listening, that they're able to kind of paint a picture of what was going on in that room.
So they're actually watching it. Okay.
Yes. So the forensic interviewer is in a room with the child, and then the detective and Child Protective Services, if they're involved, they're watching from the observation room. Back when Corey started, it was a one-way mirror. Right. That we loved, and then now they watch on a screen.
And you're talking to the child, and the detectives back there behind the scenes just making notes,
taking notes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And so there's different stages to that interview, and so for that forensic interviewer, the most important stage is that rapport stage, because if that child doesn't trust that interviewer, they're not going to talk. And so it may be one of the maybe the detective's worst part of the interview, because they're asking things like what they like to do for fun. They're asking about home life and things like that, but they're also trying to assess different things. So they're assessing that child's communication style and their developmental level, because they don't want to ask that child any questions that they know they're not going to be able to answer. So if they can't answer that type of question during rapport, when I'm asking about like, oh, this is what you like to do for fun, of course they're not going to be able to answer those types of questions when they're asked about sexual abuse. And so they're building that rapport, and they want to be able to get those like sensory details for the investigators. They want to get who, what, where, when, and how. And when you're talking to an 8-year-old, and that 8-year-old can tell you that he made me suck it till the white stuff came out, that's impactful for their investigation, because what 8-year-old, well, now might be a little different, what 8-year-old knows about white stuff coming out of a man's penis. And so that interviewer wants to try to basically make that child a truth teller, and so they're asking questions to kind of corroborate the outcry that they've made.
You said something about like some kids won't match up with the interviewer. Like, how quickly do you realize that, okay, I'm not maybe the person to talk to this child, and is there like a how does that change if do you have another forensic interviewer go at them, or how's that look?
So in the past, we have had situations to where that interviewer got in there and they realized that they weren't the best fit, and so in the moment they switched. And so we've had there's across the state there aren't a lot of African American interviewers, but a lot of the demographic that we serve are African Americans, and so that was a lot of some of the things that I ran into as an interviewer is I remember getting called in several times in the middle of the night because a detective called the on-call interviewer, and it was a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, but the victim was a black teenager and didn't want to talk to her. And so I came in and we talked because she could relate, or felt like I could relate to her a little more than someone with blonde hair.
You deal with I know a lot of the suspects are Hispanic as far as non-English speaking. Do you run across that a lot?
So we do have, and that's why we have Spanish speakers. We have, five now?
Yes.
5 Spanish speakers now, because that is part of the demographic that we serve.
Right.
Are those a lot more difficult to get the child to paint a picture that's even understandable to you?
Well, I would have to me, yes, as an English speaker.
Right.
However, we have several Spanish-speaking detectives, and so they can better understand and communicate. And usually, when I get assigned a case and I learn that it's all Spanish, one of our Spanish detectives will, okay, you give me one of yours, and you take this and you work this for me. It's better for the child. It's better for the unit. It's better for everybody. And so it's good having Spanish speakers.
Now we're on it because I know, but trust me, I've done enough of these episodes. I know how it goes. You better listen. You better give some shout outs to these Spanish speaking detectives in your unit, because they're going to listen.
Oh yeah.
So you might want to give them a shout out.
Yeah. Fidel Perez.
That's my classmate.
Alberto Layton, Jeanette Perez,
Hector
Puente. Yeah, those guys really step up.
Juan Delgado.
Juan Delgado, one of our newer detectives.
Okay.
Those guys step up. Irene Galvez, and they handle business when we can't.
And you have Blaine Burgess.
Yes.
And who else you got over there?
Cooper.
Dwayne Cooper.
Dwayne Cooper, yeah.
And I will say, aside from just them speaking Spanish, there are a lot of cultural things that come up. And I found that when I had a out-of-town forensic that I was watching, and I had this kid start talking about an egg, and the forensic interviewer had no idea what they were talking about, and I had no idea what they were talking about, and I'm like, this sounds like some folk stuff. So I texted one of our Spanish-speaking detectives, and they were able to go over that. So we are really blessed now. Corey was there when we had, I think, 2 Spanish-speaking detectives, and I think that was really brutal on the whole unit and the Spanish speakers. So we are really blessed right now to have, I think, 6.
Right, because I remember back when your lieutenant Liz was a detective there in our unit, and then Abel Lopez, who's a fantastic detective, and of course I call him the Gringo, Daniel Green, who spoke fluent Spanish. He was an amazing Spanish speaker,
And Lily White,
Lily White, and the Spanish, the Hispanic detectives would come to him and ask him about certain words in Spanish, and he knew. And
I loved
he was
it.
fantastic.
Yeah, actually,
Awesome detective.
I taught him a little bit of RMS and LEA about a month ago. I love that dude. I've known him since he was a rookie at Southeast.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah.
So Corey, the dynamics of working with FIs, and also I want y'all to kind of talk about the role of CPS, because y'all have a different dynamic than a lot of other investigative units of different people you have to rely on and work together with.
Right. Well, working with CPS in our cases, a lot of our victims, there is some type of previous history, family history with child abuse, and that's where CPS comes in. If there is previous history, even though it's not with law enforcement, they have a CPS background, and CPS can get us all of that information and tell us about what happened in prior cases, and even in some cases where we aren't able to file a criminal case against someone, well, CPS can look at it and say, well, even though that's not a criminal case, we find that there is reason to believe that this child has been harmed or could possibly be harmed. And so based on CPS guidelines, they can get involved and they can do things that we can't do. They can have parents take classes or whatnot from the family court side and do different things that we can't, so that eyes can be kept on them, and help protect the kid.
And I want to mention too that, and I know this from Kristen and just other detective friends, how CPS is so understaffed, just like everybody.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I know that there's a lot of people that complain about us, and
but
there's also a lot of people that complain about CPS.
Well, let me tell you, CPS sometimes get a bad rap. Of course, they make mistakes sometimes, just like we do. But I think the majority of them are very good workers, very capable at their job, but they are very understaffed. So they can't always do the things that we want or need them to do because there's a manpower issue.
Yeah, just like here. I mean, just any job. There's not many entities that work with law enforcement that are law enforcement that don't have shortages somewhere.
Right.
So how is that? Are CPS workers, are they housed out of DCAC as well?
Yes, is it 3 or 4 units over there, Kristen?
I never know.
Yeah, so there's either 3 or 4 units there housed out of the 6 at the DCAC. Now, I remember back when I came to child abuse back in 2006, there was only 1 unit that was housed there. Back then, there was, I believe, about 40 employees of DCAC, whereas now there's 120 employees of DCAC, and like I said, there's 6 CPS units there at the Advocacy Center. So it's pretty huge. It's a big operation that's definitely needed. I had spoke with someone the other day about the numbers. Child abuse unit, we worked over 3,100 cases this past year. That's only child abuse, and you throw in child exploitation along with high risk, they worked 1,000 cases. I spoke with one of the detectives in ICAC yesterday. They worked over 2,000 cases. I believe it was the forensic interviewers. They done over 1,000 forensic interviewers for Dallas alone. Child abuse unit was over 600. Child exploitation, just over 300 forensic interviews that they did. So We're really busy now. I wouldn't go out and start saying, well, man, Dallas has a child abuse issue in the city of Dallas. Well, it's not necessarily so, because there's 1.2 million citizens, 1.2 million people in the city of Dallas. This is a major metropolitan city. So if you look at the numbers, I wouldn't say that we have any more than any other major metropolitan city. It's just busy everywhere.
Can you tell the listener the criteria in which it falls under your unit to investigate?
Child abuse, we investigate cases that involve family members or caregivers, which could go from parents to teachers to even clergy. I've worked cases where clergy were the perpetrators, where teachers were the perpetrators, parents, cousins. We do all of that. If they're a caregiver or family member is the perpetrator, then we investigate those cases.
And it's both physical and sexual abuse by those members,
Yes.
and then child deaths under 10,
Yes.
unless it's readily apparent that it's a stranger that did
Right.
it.
Has that criteria always pretty much been in place, or is it changed over the years?
Since I've been in the unit, it's been the same criteria, I believe.
Okay. And y'all recently have this year gained a lot more cases
Correct.
than than you
Yeah,
would
I believe it
normally.
was an extra 500-600 cases this year.
That's what, something like that is what he
Something
said.
like that. Now, I can tell you, with the whole COVID thing, when the world shut down a couple of years back, our cases fell off the cliff. Kids weren't going to school, making outcries, so therefore we got less cases. Now, once everything opened back up, kids went back to school, then the cases went through the roof because, hey, what'd you do during COVID? Oh, well, this happened to me when I was at home, blah, 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 blah. Then all of a sudden these referrals are being made. And so we get those cases.
You're catching up from back then.
We're catching up from back then. Also, something else that came along with the whole COVID thing was that as far as our cases being filed with the district attorney's office, that's backed things up for going to the grand jury. What used to be a 4 to 6 week process for a case to go before the grand jury has turned into a 3 to 4 month process before it goes.
So when you going back on the flow of
Okay.
investigation, never with the FIs, you gain as much information as you can. Then how does that look for you as far as taking what the initial interviews and then the interviews after, how that looks as far as building your case up to the point of arrest
Well,
warrant?
if a kid makes an outcry, which we deem is definitely worthy of being investigated and prosecuted, we'll send the kid to the REACH clinic to have a rape kit or physical evaluation if need be. Basically, depending upon how long since the assault occurred. If it's something that happened the day before, that morning, a couple of days earlier, we'll send the kid straight to REACH to get evaluated. If not, we'll call the perp or whatnot if that's something that we need to do. If it's something that just recently happened and the perpetrator lives in the home, we'll have officers go to the residence and get them or to their job if necessary and bring them to the Advocacy Center.
And that's just to protect, like if a child's still, you do factor in if a child, they're still in immediate danger.
Correct.
Living with a suspect.
Correct, because the last thing we want to do is have that happen again right after the outcry if the perp lives in the home. We can't let that happen.
Or a retaliation.
Right,
aspect.
retaliation.
Yeah.
We don't want that child going home and being told to change their story or whatnot. We don't want that happening. We want to deal with it immediately.
Can you talk about the decision-making process in terms of when you're going to decide to file a case versus when you decide not to file a case?
Well, if it's physical abuse, it's something that we decide based upon the injuries, based upon the level of the injuries. A lot of the cases we get in that are physical abuse, A lot of the cases we don't file because in the state of Texas, you have the right to discipline your child. Sometimes that might leave a minor mark or discoloration or something. That's not abuse per se. It's just something that's a result of discipline. In a case like that, if there is no prior CPS history, there is no prior law enforcement history regarding someone disciplining their child and leaving marks and bruises, we'll usually sit down and have a talk with that individual and say, hey, by state law, you do have a right to discipline your child. However, in the future, you might want to try to do something different because you don't want to be popping up on our radar every time you discipline your child. It's just not a good looking thing. If it's a sex abuse case, a lot of our cases, there isn't any physical evidence. We have to go on the forensic interview, the word of the child, our interviews with the suspects. We'll make a determination exactly what we do. Not all cases are filed.
We get asked in court a lot, or at least I have, about whether we file all of the cases. And a lot of people will ask me, they're like, oh, you just believe in all of the kids. And while we'd like to be able to believe all of the kids, we know that not all of the time kids are going to tell the truth. Not
all the times are they going to tell the truth. And it's funny you bring that up, Christian, because one of the biggest issues that we've had on sex cases and even physical abuse cases, a lot of kids these days have iPhones or whatnot, and man, you take away a kid's phone, they feel like you're ending their lives. And so that's a lot of motivation sometimes as to why things are made up. Stories are told that are not true.
And that goes back to what Keisha said about forming that rapport with the kids and how important the forensic is, because it's very convincing when a 5-year-old explains sexually something that happened to them in 5-year-old terms. And it's really impactful when you're hearing it and you're like, I know exactly what they're saying happened to them, but they're saying it in the way a 5-year-old would say it, not the way an adult would say it.
Right.
And they shouldn't know what they're talking about. They shouldn't know anything about that. Right. So it is really impactful. And so the forensic really is, I think, a key part of the investigation. The outcry is a really important part of the investigation in terms of our sex abuse cases.
Right. Yeah, because one thing we want to do every time, we want to get it right. We don't want to put anybody in jail that doesn't need to go to jail. But the people that need to go for abusing children, we want to get that right every time. So we have a standard that we have to live up to. People have rights, and we're gonna do the right thing every time.
Corey, you talked about in your bio the mental health epidemic and how that contributes to this type of offense. Can you explain that?
I guess I use the word epidemic a little loosely. Let me just say something that I've experienced a lot over the last 5 years as opposed to earlier when I started. I've had a lot of cases, especially involving injuries, children that have been seriously injured by perpetrators, usually parents on these cases. A lot of those perpetrators, when I speak with them, I learn that they're on some type of mental health medication or supposed to be on and wasn't on. And they would say that, well, maybe that had something to do with it. I haven't had my medication at the time. And as I've done some research on some of those cases, I noticed that those perpetrators had previously been to Terrell or Dallas Behavioral Health for treatment. Not only the perps, but I've noticed that a lot of children as well have been diagnosed with mental health issues. And that's something that we're dealing with a lot.
How has technology factored into this?
Well, when I started the unit back in 2006, things were a lot different. The iPhone had not yet been created. If it was, most people didn't have it. I think the BlackBerry and some of those other phones where you could only text or whatnot. But since those smartphones have been created, that's created a whole new avenue for perpetrators to get to children, i.e. social media, Facebook and these other Instagram and other social media sites.
Is it a type of bullying, or is it just, I mean, can you explain more on that?
Well, on that, I mean from the sexual part.
Okay.
Because you have perpetrators that have access to your kids now that never had access to them before. Now, as far as the child abuse unit, we don't necessarily deal with those cases, but ICAC, child exploitation, they're much more, they deal with that a heck of a lot more than we do. And so that's created an avenue for perpetrators to get to our children.
Do you often see, like, get some of your evidence from the phones and electronic devices that maybe a family member might be using that as a way to communicate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We do that quite a bit. We do a warrant for a search of a cell phone, especially if the child mentions during a forensic interview that, oh, he or she took pictures of me or they sent me a certain text or whatnot. We're able to get a warrant for those cell phones and have ICAC go through those phones and get the necessary evidence that we need. A lot of the evidence corroborates what the children say during the forensic interview. A lot of times in the process, you learn that not only are they doing that, but you may find child porn or you may find evidences of different types of crimes.
I meant to ask this earlier about and I know every suspect's different, but I want to get into like a profile of a suspect as far as commonalities that you've seen in almost 2 decades of doing this. Were some of the is prior abuse to the suspect growing up, is that common?
A lot of the suspects, we call them perpetrators, a lot of them were victims themselves. Not only were they victims themselves, a lot of them are drug addicts, and especially when it comes to physical abuse, a lot of parents that abuse their kids, that's the way they were brought up. They were being physically abused, and maybe they didn't know. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So, Kristen, you want to talk on that as well?
For the physical abuse?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people be like, well, you can't spank your kids at all. I'm like, no, you can spank them. Your problem is probably that you waited until they were 13 and then started trying to spank them, and that was never going to go well. For our sex abuse cases, they're typically male. I've had very few female sex abuse cases, so they usually are male. And this is what gets me, I talk to you about this all the time, Joe, over 90% of abuse sexual abuse is by a person the kid knows. So it kills me when we hear this stranger danger in school. And I know that schools are going over internet safety because Carmen's talked about that stuff that she's learned in school on internet safety, and we go over that with her. But the whole idea of stranger danger, I hate it when I hear it, because majority of sexual abuse cases that we get and that the city of Dallas gets are somebody that the kid already knows.
Right.
For physical abuse, we've noticed that potty training tends to be a really big trigger for physical abuse cases. So during potty training, if we are in a case and we hear that the kid is having trouble with potty training or tends to poop a lot, or they get into their diaper and then spread poop around or whatnot, it tends to be a pretty big trigger. And we will see that a lot in terms of our physical cases.
Right. And to further on about that is a lot of our physical abuse cases, the parents have a lot of prior CPS history. I mean, this is not their first rodeo. So there's a lot of recidivism there.
And that's why it's important to document
Correct.
Properly back whenever.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And you see a lot of you notice, you pointed out that there's a lot of history with a lot of these suspects, and just like, and it's up to the initial officer responding, of making that CPS referral, to help you further your case, and then even also help that child later on that they see a pattern of
Right, and even it's very important that officers do that. But even if they don't, we always check CPS history on every case to see if there's any type of priors. Just a second ago we were talking about the mental health thing, and I want to talk about one case in particular that it's definitely a mental health case. About 2 years ago, we were in the office and we got a call saying, "Hey, there's a stabbing out at this particular address. A child has been stabbed. Patrol is out there. We need a detective out here fast." So, of course, a couple of detectives suited up and went out. Well, what had happened, there was a 7-year-old little girl that had been stabbed in excess of 30 times by her mom. The story goes, mom was visiting her mom, and she took her 7-year-old daughter over there. And so our perp, she had a 16-year-old brother. He had a friend over, and they were just hanging out. Now, this mom has had some prior mental health issues. She had been in Terrell before. She was on some mental health medication, and she has a long history of mental health issues. However, as of late, she hadn't done anything, and her child had been removed, but she had gotten her child back because she had went through the necessary steps and with CPS or whatnot, and was able to get her child back. Well, I don't know what happened that day, but brother's friend was in the bathroom combing his hair, and I don't know what happened that set this lady off. She walked in and just started stabbing this 15-year-old in the back of his head. And so the kid's yelling and screaming, and so her brother ran into the bathroom and grabbed the sister off of her and yelled for the mom to come in. And so mom came in and asked her what was wrong with her, and it was that point that she grabbed her 7-year-old daughter and she stabbed her over 30 times. There was a DSO officer who lived next door. The brother ran out screaming for help, and he's got blood all over him and everything. And so the DSO officer went around the back to see what was going on. And so the brother's friend ran outside, and so he drove him to the hospital. Well, the 7-year-old was in the living room, and she was dead. I don't know exactly what happened with the 911 system, but it was like 30 minutes before officers had gotten dispatched out to that location. My understanding was that either the sergeant or the lieutenant went into detail and said, "Hey, you guys got to suit up and get out there ASAP. We got a stabbing." So once the mother, the perp, was brought down to our office, it's probably maybe an hour and a half before I got a chance to talk to her, because there were other witnesses, neighbors from next door, the grandmother, the brother. We had to get all of them interviewed, and they just talked about how this lady just went crazy, and they talked about her mental health history. And so when I went in to speak with her, and now, granted, she had PS had come out, and they had taken her clothes and put her in, I believe it was some type of jumpsuit or something, because all the blood or whatnot. And other than learning from her mom that she had a history of mental health, I mean, this is fresh. I don't really know what's going on. And so I went in and I sat down and talked with her, and asked and told her who I was and why I was there. And it's like, I told her that my understanding was that some bad things had happened that day and that her daughter was injured. And so I read her rights, and she just looked at me and said, "I can't talk to you. I really fucked up." And so, of course, that was the end of my conversation with her. But as I went out and talked to more people, some of our detectives went out to the scene. It was gruesome. It was really bad. At that time, your unit, the OWL unit, I don't believe was in existence. And so those officers that responded to that scene, my understanding that they were really messed up from what they saw. And of course, this isn't the first time that that's happened, but they were really messed up. So what I learned was this lady had a long history of being in and out of Terrell, off of her meds. There had been a long history of CPS, of her child being removed. She had a history with DPD because she had stabbed a boyfriend a couple of years back. So I believe it was a month or so, maybe several months later, this particular individual had a twin sister, and CPS was involved in her life as well. Now, I believe that this lady lived down in Ellis County, and my understanding was that her children had been removed as well, and that due to her CPS history, and that she could not have supervised visitation with her child. CPS learned that she had those children without supervision, and that they went over there, and once CPS got there, she took a knife and stabbed several of her children, and they died as well. So the big question to me was, I mean, how could that have happened? You've got two sisters with mental health issues that are twins that have both killed their children.
I remember that case out in Ellis County.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So were you aware of this case that I worked with the sister?
No.
Oh yeah. Twin sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
You talked about the officers that responded to the scene being messed up.
Oh yeah.
How does that affect you?
Well, I mean, I definitely wish that there were some systems in place. Now there are systems in place. Back then, I'm not so sure. My understanding is that those officers were available to take some time off. Now, whether they did or not, I don't know. But I know that there's definitely systems in place now for officers to receive help.
What do you do personally to manage to live as long as you have in this same career, in this same division?
Early on, I really had a problem with dealing with it. There was a senior detective back in the day, Mike Kemp. Mike retired probably about 10 years ago. And he told me, he said, look, two things. He said, take your time off on the regular. He said, and once you do all you can to file that case, you're done with it. Don't go home thinking about it. Don't think about what you could have done. He said, man, you got to get it off of your mind. You got to take your time off. It took me a while to realize that what he was saying was based on his own experience. And so over the past several years, I take my time off. We talked about this on break. All my coworkers know that I'm up at 3:30 every morning. I'm up meditating, journaling. I go to the gym. I take my time off. Every chance I get, I'm on a beach in the Caribbean. And child abuse is nowhere on my mind. With a good cigar, a good book, some smooth jazz, and maybe one or two glasses of bourbon. And that works for me.
I noticed that most of us in the child abuse unit have certain cases that get to us, and most of the time we go out and we're fine on whatever cases we're working. But there are certain cases that, will get to people, and I'm not going to call anybody out on it, but what cases get to you the most?
There was a case probably about 7 years ago. Myself, I wasn't the lead detective. I assisted, he's a lieutenant now, Julio Gonzalez. He was a detective in our unit at the time. And it was on a Sunday. I remember it like it was yesterday. And some things you just can't unsee. Officers were called out off Royal Lane on Channel 2 Northeast Patrol Division. There was a child that was missing. I believe she was 5 years old, and mom came out. She was looking, and she couldn't find her 5-year-old daughter. So basically, the entire apartment complex is out looking for this kid. come to find out, there was a cousin that had come to town from Mexico. I believe he was 17, 18 years old at the time. And so the officers are out looking for this kid. And one of the neighbors said, well, I think she was with that guy right there before she went missing, because I saw her out playing on the steps and she was playing with that guy. And it was the cousin. He took off running. And so a couple of neighbors tackled the guy or whatnot. So they're talking to him and he wouldn't say anything. So the officers are looking around. They found an empty apartment a few buildings away, and they were able to go in through the window. And so they're looking through the apartment, and they go in the back room and they open this door, and they found this kid, 5-year-old. He had hung this girl in the closet. He had sexually assaulted her and hung her in the closet. And so we got called out, and man, we got out. I mean, those officers were really messed up. Myself and Lieutenant Julio Gonzalez then, and Sergeant Reginald Matthew, who was my sergeant at the time. And, you know, the commander at the scene was like, well, yeah, pointed us through. Yeah, she's in there. And so I went in first, and they're following me. And I remember turning the corner, I opened the closet. I will never be able to unsee in my mind this 5-year-old hanging inside the closet. And the first thing I noticed, she had very long hair. I never saw her face. Her hair was hanging over her face. And I saw those little white patent leather shoes hanging from the ground. And I can never unsee that. You know, over the years, sometimes I think about it. It's definitely not a daily thing, but I think about it from time to time, and I kind of get emotional about it. And anyway, we found out that he sexually assaulted this little girl, and Detective Julio at the time, he went down, and they had brought him down, and Julio Gonzalez had interrogated him, and he gave it up what he did, that he had raped her, and I believe he was afraid and ended up hanging the girl there in the closet in that empty apartment where he raped her at. I don't know exactly what he got, if he got life or whatnot, but there was some type of plea that he didn't go to trial. And he was just a cousin that was up visiting for a couple of weeks, and saw an opportunity and took it. And so that's one of the cases that I will never be able to unsee.
I think for most of us, because we do the deaths, we do child deaths.
We do.
And it's the cases with the absolute most depravity that you will ever see, and just this realization, and you're sitting with the case. If you're a primary detective, you're sitting with the case for at least a week, maybe weeks. You're drowning in it, right, where you're just surrounded by all of the evidence and right, all of these interviews, and you're going over it, and you may have gone to the autopsy, and you have to go over the autopsy images, and you have to rehear it over and over again. And you know that this baby or this young child does not have the ability to speak for themselves, and right, at some point did not have someone looking out for them. And you want so badly to speak for this kid, for this child, and you want to solve the case, and you want to give them the voice that that was taken from them.
Right.
And I think that, and I've seen with you, because you've gotten some just truly heinous cases since I've been on this unit. You get some of the most terrible ones, and I think those are the hardest ones to sit with. And if you are in child abuse and you haven't cried at some point going home or at work, then you're
right,
probably lying.
Yeah.
because Joe's seen it, and I think we've all seen it, and I think those are the cases, and I think with you that I've seen that those are the ones that tend to get to you the most.
Yeah, and another thing is the collateral damage that's done. Not only is this child injured or killed or whatnot, but the family, the mom that's not the perp, the siblings. If that child is gone, how do they carry on? That's one thing that's good about the DCAC is they offer therapy for the kids. They offer therapy, group therapy for the family or whatnot, and they really do the city of Dallas a solid by providing the resources that maybe the police department can't do on their own. I mean, the police department has a lot of irons in the fire, and that's where DCAC comes along and they step in and they can do some things that we can't do. They have access to things that we don't have access to.
All right, Keisha, I'm going to direct this question towards you, and I want you to kind of educate us on what the DCAC has in relation to education, services for victims. I mean, we've talked a lot. This is a heavy episode, clearly, and we knew going in it was going to be. There's no pretty side to child abuse. Okay, but can you tell the listener about some of the services that the victims have, what y'all do for the victims after the fact?
So after the fact, part of our role is to help these families put their life back together. When they come for that forensic interview, a lot of times their world gets flipped upside down. And so that day, our family advocate team steps in and they basically wrap their arms around that non-offending caretaker and try to fill in the gaps, because there's a lot of times the perpetrator is the breadwinner. So mom doesn't know how she's going to make ends meet. And so we try to help with that. We do help with therapy services for the family, for the non-offending family members, but we also step in throughout the year as well. And so we have different drives that we put on for our kiddos. So we do, there's trunk or treat. So if they want to come and have a safe space to trick or treat, they can come and do that. We have our back to school drives. We just finished up Holiday of Hope because a lot of our kiddos wouldn't have a Christmas. And so they can come to DCAC, their parents come and they basically shop for them and they can have a Christmas now. We also, basically anything you can think of to make sure that family has what they need. We do room makeovers because for a lot of our kiddos, that abuse happened in their room, right? And now they have to return back to that room. And so we'll do a room makeover for that kiddo so that when they walk into their room, they're not reminded of the abuse that has happened to them. And our partners get involved in those things too. And so our role is just really to help this family break down any barriers that may come, because a lot of barriers will come after all of this.
And it's different for every folks.
And it's different for each family. Mm-hmm. Some families come and they do well. They may go into therapy or sometimes they don't even need therapy at that time, right? We also have an open door policy. And so the family may be okay initially and then something else hits. And this on top of that sends them in a whirlwind. And so they can always come back for therapy services. We also have a graduation. And so when those kiddos reach the point to where our therapist is like, okay, they're good. They don't need us anymore. They have a graduation. And so all of us stand in our long hallway and we basically cheer that child on and they get to run through and give us high fives and we're cheering them on because a lot of them, when they first came into that building, it was the darkest day for them. And a lot of them leaving out, life has completely changed. They're flourishing. They're doing well in school, and that abuse didn't define who they were. And so that's part of our role at DCAC, letting those kids know and those families know that this abuse and what happened to your family doesn't define Well, can it make you stronger? Yes. Was it a setback? Yes. But we're trying to get them to the point to where they know, like, it doesn't have to have a negative impact, a long-term negative impact on their life.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you do that for the families, and I would imagine that as long as you've been there, you've seen a lot of change just in that regard. Because I'm a big believer that every unit should be ever evolving, and services like that, I'm sure it looks way different now than whenever you first started
most
at the
definitely.
DC, and that's a good thing.
In 2008, we had one family advocate, Mindy, who is still there. But now we have there's probably 20 advocates
Correct.
now. And so we realized over time, like, this was something that our families needed. And so we had to ourselves grow and adjust and, to try to get the families what they need and try to make it a one-stop shop to where they're not having to go to 50 million different places to get the help they need. I think another thing that's important for our detectives to remember is, yes, we offer those services to the families, but we also offer those services to y'all too,
Right.
because this work is hard.
Right.
And so one of the things that it's been kind of hard to push to our law enforcement counterparts is your mental health is important. And in these cases, seeing what you guys have to see, you can't be in the field that long and it not take a toll on you. And so when you have these tough cases, remembering that we do have resources for y'all too,
Right.
because I know you say you couldn't be a forensic interviewer.
No.
As a forensic interviewer, we don't have to see what you have to see.
Right.
We don't have to go out to the scene. Like, one of the things that makes it hard in my role now is having to remind the Advocacy Center staff that we have the luxury of just believing kids.
Right.
And y'all don't.
Right.
And that also can take a toll, because there's times where you do all of this work and you still don't have enough to arrest, or you still don't have enough to convict. And so allowing us to also take care of you guys, because I know a lot of times, Kristen too,
Yeah.
I think y'all are so used to making sure everyone else is okay,
Right.
and being that first responder that
Right.
you forget about you. And so your trips and all that stuff is great, but let somebody else pour into you,
Right.
because you can't keep pouring into all these families and pouring into, I mean, there's been times where y'all have had to console me crying, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one good thing. Another good thing about the MDT is because we've become, especially those that have been there for a long time, I think I met you in 2008.
Right.
We become family.
Right.
And so allowing people to carry that burden with you and realize that you don't have to carry it by yourself. And even if that is a late night phone call or a text message like, hey, sis, I need something.
Right.
I need to curse somebody out. I need to do
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
we got you.
Yeah.
And so, were you about to say something?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Oh, you look like, I was like, oh.
Well, something I've noticed in the unit, do you talk about work at home?
No.
Yeah. And I I'm with Joe, so I can talk a little bit about work because I'm married to an officer. But there's a certain way that we talk in the unit.
Oh,
There's a banter that we have,
Right.
and there is that you can't talk about
No,
outside
you
of work.
cannot.
You can't.
No.
You can't have those kinds of conversations. You can't have that banter, and you can't talk. And it took me, I would say, at least a year or a couple years on the unit to realize how strange we are, even for other law enforcement.
Right.
And how and we're very close. We are very blessed. We have a very close unit that, we can banter, we can not get along, but at the end of the day, we're still working together. We still work together really well, which is one of the reasons I love this unit, and I feel really blessed. But it is, even for other law enforcement, I talked the way that we talk in the unit to other law enforcement, and people look at me like, are you okay? Are you crazy? Like, what are you guys doing?
Right.
So you guys have some pretty heavy cases, and
yeah.
and you guys often end up in court.
Yes.
Do you celebrate your convictions?
No.
Might be something you guys look at. I mean, you guys are doing fantastic work, number one, by investigating the entire case and presenting it to the jury the way you do. You need to recognize that you put the work in and that you did everything that you could and that you succeeded in finding justice. Because I think that would be a huge thing for that entire unit, and really every unit on this department. Celebrate your successes and, kick those other ones to the side.
Speaking of that, are there some cases that you have worked your ass off on? The units worked their ass off on. The FIs have worked their asses off on to collaborate, and you go up for prosecution, or it just can't prosecute them. It doesn't work out. Does any of those cases stand out to you?
Yeah, actually, there was a case I had several years ago with your commander, Liz Rivera. She and I worked a case together. Received a call from patrol saying, "Hey, we're out at Berkner High School. We know this is in Richardson, but the girl lives in the city of Dallas, and she was 13. The girl had gone to school with some scratches on her face, and the teacher had asked her, what happened to you?" And she said, "Well, me and my stepdad got into a fight last night because I didn't want to have sex." And so she was like, "Well, what do you mean? Why is he trying to have sex with you?" And well, we have a baby together and whatnot. But the teacher ended up calling in a CPS referral, and the police came out, and the girl was brought to our advocacy center where she was interviewed. And she was 13 years old. She resided in her apartment with her mom, and she had two siblings that her stepdad was the father of. During the interview, the girl said that 2 years earlier that her stepfather had started having sex with her. She was 11 years old. She didn't tell her mom because she was afraid, and he had threatened to harm the family if she ever told her mom. Well, one day while she was at school, mom's cleaning the bedroom, cleaning this girl's room, and she finds a napkin that was very crusty. And so mom didn't know what that was. And of course, later we found out, I assume it was semen. When the girl got home, mom asked this girl, "What is this?" And that's when the girl outcried to her mom, and she was 11 years old at the time, that, stepdad's been coming in raping me or whatnot. Well, you would think that mom's first thing to do would be to protect her child, but that wasn't the case. Well, when stepdad got home that evening from work, she said, "You need to make a decision. You want my daughter or you want me? You cannot have both." Well, stepdad chose the 11-year-old daughter. And so mom told the daughter, from now on, you're going to sleep with him every night. You're going to cook his food. You're going to wash his clothes, because I'm not doing it anymore. If you want to steal my husband, you want him to be your husband, well, you're going to start doing those things that I do. Well, from that point on, the girl said that he slept in her room every night. He had sex with her most nights. At 12, she ended up getting pregnant. She had a baby. No one at school knew that she had the baby or whatnot. So after the forensic interview, mom was called to the advocacy center. She had no reason. She didn't have any knowledge as to why she was called. Mom was Spanish speaking. So Liz Rivera ended up talking to mom and everything. And mom broke down and was crying and said, "She stole my husband." And we ended up charging mom with continuous sexual abuse of a young child because she was a party to the act, and she basically suggested that he do that. Now, him, on the other hand, he fled to Mexico. We were never able to get him. So Mom's still in doing her 25 years mandatory for that charge of continuous sexual abuse of a young child. 25 years is the mandatory sentence. Where stepdad is still in Mexico somewhere, we believe. He was never arrested. This was several years ago. Now, the worst thing about this case, I mean that was bad, but when I say collateral damage, there's even worse. Couple of years after that, I got called from officers down at Southeast saying, hey, we arrested this prostitute down here. And she's saying that what she's doing is not her fault, that she was raped by her stepdad, and that she's hooked on drugs because of that, and that she's out here, and she gave us your name. And so I'm just, man, who is this person? So, I look her up, and I was, oh my gosh. It was that girl. Complainant. Strung out on meth, prostituting. It was just a tragedy. What ended up happening from that point on, I don't know. I didn't keep up with it. But that was definitely a tragedy, and there's absolutely nothing we could do to arrest that man because he's out of the country. Mom's still in jail. Where this girl's baby is and her siblings, I have no idea. But that's one of the tragedies of what we do. A lot of times we want to get justice, but what is justice? That girl didn't get any justice. I don't even know if she's still alive. So that's one of the tragedies of the remnants of what we do sometimes, of what we have to deal with.
One of the many tragedies.
Yes.
And remnants that carries over.
Yes.
Forever. I mean, that it almost, you hear it all the time, is that person never had a chance.
Right.
And that is
right.
That's a great example of a bad example of not having a chance at life.
Yeah. But just like there's those bad cases like that, we do have good cases. We do have cases where we get convictions. We do have cases where kids get therapy, where families get therapy. A couple of years ago, I got a call from a lady saying, hey, Detective Foreman, do you remember me? And I was like, well, ma'am, I don't. And she said, well, you investigated a case with my granddaughter, and I'd like to come up and see you. I was like, okay, I remember this lady. And once she ended up showing up at the Advocacy Center, I immediately remembered her. And she had this beautiful young lady with her. And she said, well, this is my granddaughter. And she had graduated at the top of her class. And she said, I want to thank you for getting us the help that we need. She said, and I'd like to thank, because of you and the help that you offered us, that she's here today graduating at the top of her class and about to go off to college. And I just want to thank you for what you did. It was really good feeling, that everything's not a loss. I mean, I've learned that if we can help one a day, that's awesome. If you get the chance to help 2 or 3 or more, hey man, that's more the merrier. But if you can help one, well then we've done our job, and we're going to continue to do our job. And that's one thing that helps me get through doing this. And if we can help one every day, well then we're doing the right thing.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the cut. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.